The blood-stained letter trembled in Clara Ross's hands as she stood on the wooden porch of her family's small homestead, watching dust clouds rise on the horizon, men coming to collect what her father had promised before dying of fever 3 days ago. At 21, she never imagined becoming currency to pay off gambling debts in the unforgiving territory of Wyoming, 1876. "They'll be here by sundown," Mrs. Whittaker said, the neighbor who'd come to help Clara prepare. "Your father's arrangements were specific." "The auction will happen tomorrow at noon." Clara's throat tightened. "An auction like cattle?" Mrs. Whittaker's weathered face softened with pity. "Some wealthy men are coming, ranchers mostly. Your father thought," she hesitated, "he thought it would guarantee you a comfortable life." "By selling me to the highest bidder." Clara crushed the letter in her fist. "There must be another way. The debts are substantial, child. Without this, you'll lose everything and have nowhere to go, at least this way." The older woman didn't finish her sentence. Clara turned away, fighting tears. 3 days of grieving had left her hollow, but this new betrayal cut deeper than her father's death. She'd spent her life on this homestead, helping her father after her mother died of tuberculosis when Clara was just 16. Now she was to be bartered away like livestock. The distant riders grew larger. 4 men, their horses kicking up summer dust as they approached. "Remember, hold your head high," Mrs. Whittaker whispered. "A lady maintains dignity even in impossible circumstances." The men dismounted in the yard. The leader, a thin man with spectacles perched on a hawkish nose, introduced himself as Mr. Pullman, her father's lawyer. "Miss Ross, my condolences on your loss," he said without emotion. "I've come to execute the final arrangements." Clara's fingers dug into her palms. "I never agreed to this." "Your signature isn't required. Your father's will is quite clear." He produced a document from his satchel. "The auction will be held tomorrow at the Silver Dollar. Several prominent gentlemen have expressed interest." One of the other men snickered. Clara felt bile rising in her throat. "I refuse," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Mr. Pullman adjusted his spectacles. "Then the bank will seize this property immediately for your father's unpaid debts. You'll have until morning to vacate." Clara looked at the only home she'd ever known, the vegetable garden she'd tended, the apple tree she'd climbed as a child, the porch where her mother had taught her to sew. She had nowhere else to go, no family, no money. The auction. "What exactly does it entail?" she asked, hating each word. "Marriage, Miss Ross. The highest bidder wins your hand. It's all perfectly legal." That night, Clara barely slept. She considered running away, but to where? With what money? The prairie was unforgiving to lone women with no resources. By morning, she'd resigned herself to her fate, packing a small trunk with her meager possessions. Mrs. Whittaker arrived early to help her dress in her best, a blue calico dress that had belonged to her mother. "There'll be good men there," Mrs. Whittaker said, pinning Clara's honey-brown hair. "Ranchers with money, you could have a comfortable life." "As property," Clara replied bitterly. The older woman sighed. "Life isn't fair to women out here. We take what security we can find." By 11, Clara sat rigidly in a wagon beside Mr. Pullman, heading toward Timber Creek, the nearest town. Her stomach twisted with each rotation of the wheels. The Silver Dollar Saloon fell silent as Clara entered. Men of all ages filled the space, some in suits indicating wealth, others in range clothes showing dust from long rides. All eyes tracked her movement as Mr. Pullman led her to a small platform at the front. "Gentlemen," Pullman announced, "as advertised, we're here for the auction of Miss Clara Ross's hand in marriage, as stipulated by the late Joseph Ross to settle his outstanding debts. The minimum bid is $500. The winner must agree to immediate marriage by the town preacher who waits next door." Clara scanned the room, fighting nausea. Some men looked at her with naked lust, others with calculation, as if assessing a mare at market. A heavyset man in an expensive suit stepped forward. "I'm Theodore Blackwell, owner of the Double B Ranch. I'll start the bidding at $600. $700, called another, a silver-haired man old enough to be her grandfather. $800, Blackwell countered. The bidding continued, rising rapidly. Clara stood frozen, her face a careful mask hiding her devastation as her future was bartered away. The amount reached $1,500, a small fortune in these parts. 1,500 going once, Pullman called. 2,000, came a new voice, silencing the room. Clara turned to see a tall man at the back. Unlike the others, he wore simple clothes, a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, jeans dusty from the trail. A cowboy's hat shadowed his face, but she could see he was younger than many of the bidders, perhaps late 20s. Theodore Blackwell's face darkened. 2,500. The cowboy stepped forward, and Clara could see him clearly now, sun-bronzed skin, strong jaw dusted with stubble, and eyes the color of a summer sky. 3,000, he said, his voice steady. Murmurs swept through the crowd. $3,000 was a staggering sum. Blackwell's jowls quivered with anger. 3,500, the cowboy never took his eyes off Clara. 4,000, impossible, Blackwell spat. No saddle tramp has that kind of money. The cowboy reached into his vest and tossed a bank draft onto the table before Pullman. It's good, certified by the Timber Creek Bank. Pullman examined it, eyebrows rising in surprise. It appears to be in order, Mr. Blackwell. The bid stands at $4,000. Blackwell's face flushed purple. 5,000, he growled. The room fell silent. No one had expected the bidding to reach such heights. The cowboy stepped closer to the platform, and for the first time his eyes met Clara's. Something passed between them, not ownership or lust, but something she couldn't name. I don't have more money, he said, loud enough for all to hear. But I'll win you with my soul if I have to. Laughter erupted from several men. Blackwell smirked triumphantly. Young man, Pullman said, this is a financial transaction, not poetry hour. Wait, Clara said suddenly, surprising herself. Everyone turned to her. She'd been instructed not to speak, to be a passive object in this transaction, but something in the cowboy's words had pierced her numbness. I want to hear what he means. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing thick chestnut hair. My name is Benjamin Quinn. I own a small spread east of here, nothing like Blackwell's ranch. I can't match his money, but I can promise you this. You'll never be property on my land. You'll be a partner. I'll work until my hands bleed to give you a good life, but I'll never own you. Ridiculous, Blackwell interrupted. The girl isn't here for marriage counseling. This is business. Is it? Benjamin Quinn asked. Because I see a woman, not merchandise. He turned back to Clara. Miss Ross, I have $4,000. It's everything I've saved over 10 years of hard work. I came here today because I couldn't stand by while a woman was sold like cattle. I'm offering that money and a promise that you'll never be treated as anything less than my equal. Clara's heart thundered in her chest. This man, this stranger, was offering her something no one else had, dignity. Mr. Pullman cleared his throat uncomfortably. This is highly irregular. Mr. Blackwell's bid stands at 5,000. My father's debts, Clara said, finding her voice. What is the exact amount? Pullman consulted his papers. $3,842. Clara took a deep breath. Then Mr. Quinn's 4,000 would settle the debt completely? Yes, and this is my hand in marriage being sold, is it not? It is, but then I believe I should have some say in whose offer is accepted. Blackwell stepped forward menacingly. Now see here, girl, this isn't how an auction works. Perhaps it should be, Clara replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. Mr. Quinn has offered enough to settle my father's debts. I accept his offer. The saloon erupted in angry shouts and arguments. Blackwell's face contorted with fury. This is outrageous, he bellowed. I've been cheated. Benjamin Quinn moved protectively toward Clara. The lady has made her choice. Pullman looked flustered. This is most irregular, but the debt would be satisfied. I won't stand for it, Blackwell thundered. Then sit down, Theodore, came a new voice. Sheriff Miller had entered the saloon, his weathered face stern beneath his silver mustache. The lady's made her choice and the debt's being paid. That was the purpose, wasn't it? Blackwell glared at the sheriff, then at Clara and Benjamin. You'll regret this, he hissed before storming out, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. An hour later, Clara stood beside Benjamin Quinn in the small church, reciting vows to a man she'd met only hours before. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife with obvious discomfort at the unusual circumstances. As they stepped outside into the harsh sunlight, Clara felt dazed. She was now Clara Quinn, married to a stranger who had spent his life savings to rescue her from a worse fate. "My wagon's this way," Benjamin said gently. "It's a few hours' ride to my place." Clara nodded, following him. "Why did you do it?" she asked as he helped her onto the wagon seat. Benjamin settled beside her, taking the reins. "I couldn't bear to watch it. My mother was forced into a similar situation when I was a boy. The man who bought her was cruel." His knuckles whitened on the reins. "No one helped her. I swore I'd never stand by if I saw it happening again. Your $4,000, that was everything?" "Yes." He flicked the reins and the wagon lurched forward. "But it was just money. I can earn more." Clara studied his profile as they left town. "You said I'd be a partner, not property." "I meant it." His eyes met hers briefly. "I don't expect anything from you, Clara. You can have your own room. If you want to leave someday when you've found your footing, I won't stop you. I just couldn't let Blackwell take you." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. "Thank you," she whispered. They rode in silence for a while, leaving Timber Creek behind. The rolling prairie stretched before them, golden in the afternoon sun. Clara felt as if she were suspended between lives. Her old one ended, the new one not yet begun. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally. Benjamin's expression lightened. "It's nothing grand, 200 acres, a small herd of cattle, some horses. The house needs work, but it's sturdy. There's a good creek running through the property, never runs dry even in summer. You built it yourself, every board." Pride colored his voice. "Took me 3 years to save enough to buy the land, another 2 to build the house and barn. Been adding to the herd slowly. I was in town to deposit money from selling some cattle when I heard about the auction." He glanced at her. "I'm sorry about your father." Clara looked away. "He wasn't always a good man. The gambling got worse after my mother died. Grief does strange things to people." The simple compassion in his words touched her. Her father had been flawed, sometimes neglectful, often focused more on cards than his daughter, but Benjamin wasn't judging him or her. As the wagon crested a hill, Benjamin pointed. "There it is, Quinn Ranch." Clara saw a modest homestead nestled in a valley, a solid 1-story house with a wide porch, a large barn, corrals, and beyond them, the glint of water where the creek ran. It wasn't grand like Blackwell's spread would have been, but it looked like a home. "It's lovely," she said, meaning it. Benjamin looked pleased. "The garden's not much. I'm better with cattle than vegetables." "I'm good with gardens," Clara offered, "and chickens. We always had chickens." "I've been meaning to build a coop," he said, a smile warming his features. "Just haven't found the time." By the time they reached the house, the sun was low in the sky. Benjamin helped Clara down from the wagon, then carried her trunk to the porch. "I'll show you around," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. "It's not much, but it's more than I expected to have today," Clara interrupted gently. The house was simple but clean, with a large kitchen, a comfortable sitting room with bookshelves, and 2 bedrooms. Benjamin showed her to the smaller one. "This can be yours," he said. "I hope it's all right." The room was plain but had a good bed with a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the creek. "It's perfect," Clara said. "I'll let you settle in. There's stew left from yesterday I can heat up." Over dinner, they talked. Benjamin told her about growing up in Missouri, coming west at 17, working cattle drives until he saved enough for his own land. Clara shared stories of her mother teaching her to read and sow, the vegetable garden they'd tended together. The years after her death, when Clara had essentially run the household while her father drifted further into gambling. "I've never been good at keeping house," Benjamin admitted. "Fair warning. I've never minded housework," Clara replied, "but I also like being outdoors. My father thought it unladylike, but my mother always let me help with the animals and garden." "You can do whatever you like here," Benjamin said, "inside or out." That night, lying in her new bed, Clara stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. She was married to a stranger who had spent everything to save her from being sold to the highest bidder. A man who had promised she wouldn't be property and then given her a room of her own without expectations. For the first time in days, she fell asleep without tears. The next weeks established a rhythm. Clara took over the kitchen and household, while also starting a vegetable garden beside the house. Benjamin built a chicken coop as promised, and Clara acquired 6 hens from a neighbor. They worked side by side mending fences, and he taught her to ride properly so she could help with the cattle if needed. They lived as polite strangers sharing a home, careful with each other's space and feelings. Benjamin never entered her room, never presumed upon his rights as a husband. At night, they would sometimes sit on the porch, watching the stars emerge while sharing details of their lives, slowly building a friendship from the unusual foundation of their marriage. Clara found herself watching him when he didn't notice the way his hands moved confidently over leather when mending tack, how his face lit when he smiled, the gentleness he showed to animals. She began looking forward to their evening conversations, to hearing his laugh, to the quiet comfort of his presence. One evening, a month after their wedding, Benjamin returned from checking the herd with news. "Two of Blackwell's men were on our northeast boundary," he said, his expression troubled. "Said they were chasing strays, but they didn't have any cattle with them." "Do you think they were looking for something else?" Clara asked, setting down the shirt she was mending. "Maybe." "Blackwell's not one to forget a grudge." He sat heavily in his chair. "I should have warned you, he has influence in these parts. You think he means to cause trouble?" Benjamin shrugged. "Just be careful if you're out alone." 2 days later, Clara was gathering eggs when she heard horses approaching. 3 riders appeared in the yard, Theodore Blackwell in the lead. Benjamin was out checking cattle, not expected back for hours. Clara set down her basket and stood straight. "Mr. Blackwell," she acknowledged coolly. Blackwell dismounted, his expensive boots stirring dust. "Mrs. Quinn," he said, the name sounding like an insult in his mouth. "Or should I call you Miss Ross? Hard to believe you're truly married to that saddled tramp." "My husband isn't here," Clara said, ignoring the taunt. "I'll tell him you called." Blackwell stepped closer. "I didn't come to see him, I came to make you an offer." "I'm not for sale, Mr. Blackwell," he laughed, an ugly sound. "Everyone has a price. Your cowboy had his $4,000, spent everything to play hero." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "But he's in over his head. Did you know there's a lien against this property? Your husband borrowed money last year for cattle and seed. With the drought affecting his herd, he's falling behind on payments." Clara's stomach tightened. Benjamin hadn't mentioned any debt. "I've purchased the note from the bank," Blackwell continued smugly. "If he defaults, this land becomes mine, and he will default. I've made sure the drought won't be his only problem." "What do you mean?" Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Cattle have a way of disappearing. Markets have a way of closing to certain sellers. Quinn will lose everything, including you, unless—" "Unless what?" Clara asked, though she already knew. "Unless you come with me now, I'll tear up this note and your cowboy keeps his pathetic ranch. You get the security of a real home, not this struggling homestead." Clara felt ice in her veins. "That's your offer, blackmail and intimidation. I call it business, my dear. Quinn can't protect you or this land. I can." He extended the paper toward her. "What's it to be?" "Your freedom for his ranch." Clara looked at the farmhouse where she'd begun to feel at home, at the garden she'd planted, the chickens scratching in the yard. She thought of Benjamin's kindness, his respect, the growing warmth between them. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, her voice steady, "my husband may not be wealthy, but he has something you never will." "And what's that?" he sneered. "Honor." She stepped back toward the house. "Now get off our land." Blackwell's face darkened. "You'll regret this. I'll take everything from him and you'll end up with nothing." "That's where you're wrong," came Benjamin's voice from behind the house. He emerged with his rifle, not pointed at the men but held ready. "Clara could never have nothing because she has herself. That's something no one can take from her." "Quinn," Blackwell acknowledged coldly. "Eavesdropping were you. It's my property. Hard to eavesdrop on your own land." Benjamin moved to stand beside Clara. "I heard enough. You threatening my wife, talking about cattle disappearing, just business." "Stealing is a hanging offense, Blackwell." The older man laughed. "You'd need proof, and sympathetic ears. Sheriff Miller listens to those who contribute generously to his re-election." "Maybe," Benjamin kept his voice level, "but Judge Carlton doesn't. And I've been documenting the accidents happening to small ranchers who cross you. Cattle with your brand showing up in other herds, suddenly rebranded, water rights mysteriously changing hands." Blackwell's confident smile faltered slightly. "No one would believe a nobody like you." They might believe Patrick Donovan, though. Blackwell's face paled. Patrick Donovan was the territory's federal marshal, known for his incorruptibility. Donovan and I rode together years back, Benjamin continued. He's been collecting statements for months. Just waiting for someone bold enough to file formal charges. His eyes hardened. You threaten my wife again, and I'll be that someone. The two men faced each other, tension crackling between them. Finally, Blackwell spat in the dust. This isn't over, Quinn. He mounted his horse. Enjoy your land while you can. As the men rode away, Clara turned to Benjamin, her hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. You didn't tell me about the loan. Benjamin lowered his rifle. I didn't want to worry you. I have a payment plan worked out with the bank. He looked troubled. Or I did before Blackwell bought the note. Will we lose the ranch? Not if I can help it. He hesitated. Clara, if you want to leave, leave. Why would I leave? Blackwell's right about one thing. I can't offer you much security. This place, it's always one bad season from ruin. Clara stepped closer to him. Benjamin Quinn, did you hear nothing I said to that man? I'm exactly where I want to be. Something shifted in his eyes. Even married to a stranger, you don't feel like a stranger anymore. The admission came easily, surprising her with its truth. These past weeks, I've come to know you, to respect you. She stopped, suddenly unsure. To what? He asked softly. Instead of answering, Clara did something she'd been thinking about for days. She rose on her toes and kissed him, a gentle press of lips that held all the words she couldn't yet say. When she pulled back, Benjamin looked stunned, then broke into a slow smile that transformed his face. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, he admitted. But I promised you wouldn't be property, that I'd respect your choices. This is my choice, she whispered. That night, for the first time, they shared a bed as true husband and wife, discovering each other with tenderness and growing passion. Afterward, lying in his arms, Clara felt a sense of rightness she'd never expected to find in this arranged marriage. Blackwell will still try to take the ranch, Benjamin said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Then we'll fight him together, Clara replied. I'm good at fighting for what matters. The battle with Blackwell raged through the summer and into fall. True to his word, he used his influence to make life difficult. Cattle mysteriously disappeared. A supplier refused to sell them feed. The bank suddenly demanded larger payments. But Clara and Benjamin faced each challenge together. They worked longer hours, found new buyers for their cattle, planted more crops. When Blackwell's men tampered with their water supply, Benjamin rode to neighboring ranches, building alliances with others who'd suffered under Blackwell's tactics. Marshal Donovan arrived in October, grim-faced and determined. With Benjamin's documentation and testimonies from other ranchers, he built a case against Blackwell for fraud, extortion, and theft. The day Blackwell was arrested, Benjamin and Clara stood on their porch, watching the marshal lead the once powerful rancher away in handcuffs. It's really over, Clara said, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Thanks to you. Benjamin kissed her forehead. You gave me the courage to stand up to him. Before you, I was just trying to survive. You made me want to fight. We fought together, she corrected. Partners, remember, as winter settled over the land, bringing early snow and quiet evenings by the fire, Clara and Benjamin's bond deepened. The ranch flourished under their joint care, his knowledge of cattle combined with her skill at household management, creating a profitable, comfortable home. On Christmas morning, Clara presented Benjamin with a hand-knit sweater and news that made his eyes widen with joy. A baby, you're sure? Clara nodded, her own happiness mirrored in his expression. In summer, our family is growing, Benjamin Quinn. He gathered her in his arms, his voice thick with emotion. When I rode into town that day, I never imagined. He shook his head, wonderment on his face. I just couldn't bear to see you sold like property. You said you'd win me with your soul, Clara reminded him, touching his cheek. You did exactly that. I love you, Clara Quinn, he whispered against her hair. With everything I am, and I love you, she replied. My husband, my choice. Outside, snow fell on the land that was truly theirs now. The banker, eager to distance himself from Blackwell after the arrest, had restructured their loan on favorable terms. The ranch was secure, their future bright with promise. That night, as they lay together beneath the quilt Clara had made, Benjamin's hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the depths of despair on her father's porch, facing an auction that would sell her like livestock, to this moment of perfect contentment beside a man who had offered his soul instead of just his money. "What are you thinking?" Benjamin asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we're meant to be," she answered. "If my father hadn't gambled, if you hadn't come to town that day, if you hadn't been brave enough to choose the poor cowboy over the rich rancher," he added with a smile. "The best choice I ever made," Clara nestled closer to him. "Though you're not so poor anymore, Mr. Quinn, our herd's nearly doubled, true, but I'd give it all up tomorrow if I had to choose between the ranch and you." "You'll never have to make that choice," Clara promised. "Whatever comes, we face it together." As spring arrived, bringing new calves to the herd and green shoots to Clara's garden, they received word that Theodore Blackwell had been sentenced to 10 years in territorial prison. His empire was dismantled, his land sold to pay restitution to those he'd wronged. Judge Carlton himself rode out to deliver the news, staying for dinner and admiring the obvious happiness of the Quinn household. "Remarkable what you two have built here," the judge commented. "From such unusual beginnings. Love finds strange paths sometimes," Benjamin replied, his hand finding Clara's. In June, as wildflowers painted the prairie in splashes of color, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Hope. Benjamin held the tiny girl with trembling hands, his eyes filled with tears of joy. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Like her mother." Clara watched her husband with their child, remembering the man who had stood in a crowded saloon and offered his soul to save a stranger. Not a stranger anymore, but the other half of her heart, the father of her child, the partner in her life. "I was thinking," Benjamin said as he placed the sleeping infant in her cradle, "we should expand the house, add another bedroom, maybe a larger kitchen, planning for more children already." Clara teased, "Planning for our future." He sat beside her on the bed. "This is just the beginning, Clara Quinn. We have a lifetime ahead." She leaned into his embrace, content in the knowledge that the auction that had seemed like the end of her life had instead been its true beginning. Not as property to be bought and sold, but as a woman who had found her place, her purpose, and her love in the arms of a cowboy who had won her with his soul.